Welcome to the Champions of Active Women podcast. In this podcast, we will interview individuals who have been successful within athletics and beyond. We hope that these interviews will encourage and inspire girls and women to be active for a lifetime, to reach their goals, and to break new barriers in sport and life. This podcast is brought to you by the Active Women's Health Initiative and the Sports Medicine Research Institute at the University of Kentucky. The mission of the Active Women's Health Initiative is to optimize health and promote physical activity and wellness for girls and women across the lifespan. We hope you enjoy our conversations and join us in understanding women's health today to ensure women's health tomorrow. My name is Dee Dugonski, and I'm your host of the Champions of Active Women podcast. With me today is Brigid DeVries. Brigid is a graduate of the University of Kentucky and has been a pioneer in women's sports in Kentucky. She coached several sports and helped to transition women's sports from the club to varsity level. In 2002, Brigid became the first female commissioner for the Kentucky High School Athletic Association, where she oversaw the Title IX program for all Kentucky high school member schools and is credited with expanding opportunities in sport for girls in Kentucky. Brigid received the Department of Education Award for her contribution to women's sports in Kentucky and was inducted into the Kentucky High School Athletic Association Hall of Fame. She still remains active on several boards, and we're lucky to have her as a member of the Active Women's Health Initiative Advisory Board. Welcome, Brigid. Thanks for joining us today.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Great. So could you start today by talking a little bit about your own personal early sport and physical activity experiences?
I will, and I can go back to my parents and my mother who wanted to be sure that we were busy all the time. My father was a tennis player, played in junior college, and so on summer vacations we would always pick up a racket. And so this is when I was very little. And then after that, it was like, okay, you need some instruction. So the Parks Department, that are now under the Lexington-Fayette-Urban County government, had excellent tennis programs in those days. And so I went to Woodland Park and participated in group tennis, and then I graduated up to Junior Davis Cup, and so I loved that. My mother liked to swim, and so we would go to the pools, learn to swim. And then my best friend was a swimmer with Greater Lexington Swim Association, and I'm really going way back.
Yeah, it's not that anymore, right?
No, it's evolved into several others, programs. But in those days, it was the first competitive program in Lexington. Mm-hmm. So the two of us began swimming, and then my other best friend, Bonnie, we decided we liked to dive also. And I'm going back because AAU swimming and diving was one organization. So in those days, we would compete. We would swim. Some of the team would swim and some would dive. And Bonnie and myself became the divers. So we kind of morphed into the diving team. Now, since the Olympic Sports Act, everything's separate. You have United States diving, United States swimming, et cetera, et cetera. So, but in those days, we did it all. So I kind of just liked to participate in a lot of things. I played in just church league type softball. So I just like to be active and be outside.
What do you think contributed to that early love of sport and physical activity?
It was just encouraged in our family, and to this day. I mean, my father played tennis till he was 95. He was left-handed, and he did not mind taking a cheap shot at you. So we just liked the water. We liked the tennis courts. We liked to be out and about. Nobody was sitting around in those days.
Yeah. So it's just part of your family,
part of our life
culture. Did you have siblings as well?
I did. Okay. My older brother was an excellent basketball player. And he was always active, and it was recreational type in the summer because he participated on the high school basketball team, but the parks were where you really learned to play basketball. Mm-hmm. And he would take out, 9 o'clock in the morning. Those were the days when parents, you rode your bike to the parks, you played all day, came back, and honed his skills in that fashion. My sister, one other activity, which probably doesn't get a lot of credit in the dance world, in the sports world, is dance. And my mother, we were in ballet class, tap and ballet, and my sister was involved in that, my older sister. She was more of a dancer, so to speak.
Okay. So a whole family affair, really, in your house. Could you talk about how those early experiences maybe impacted your education?
Well, you learned subtly that you had to budget your time if you wanted to do all these fun things. And so a little bit older, I was coming through my educational background, so to speak, pre-Title IX. So a lot of the activities you had were club-type teams or recreational-type teams, but you didn't get to do those if you didn't study and you didn't make your grades, et cetera.
Yeah.
And so, sports, I loved them. They were so dynamic, and they were like nothing else. I was a big reader also, but, I like to read and I like to play sports. So it's like, well, okay, I'm going to do all of this. And, you learn to, that if you wanted to do the fun stuff, you also had to knuckle under on your education side of it.
And then thinking also, similar question, but about your career. So how did sports and being active impact your career?
I'll have to say that I was a big observer of things that I thought were interesting. So, I'm going to talk about Win Paul, and he was the one originally from Louisville, worked at Plantation Swim Club up there. And he began the Great Lakes and Swim Association. Well, I love the water. So I like to swim. I like to dive. And then little opportunities came your way. When I was about 15, I wanted to be a lifeguard because I observed that looks like a cool job in the summer, and so I began, and I morphed lifeguarding into a career. Okay. So my first, job was a lifeguard, made $136 an hour, which was a lot of money in those days. Yeah. And so then after that, the manager at our pool said, and guess what? You all are going to teach in the Red Cross Learn to Swimming program, all my guards. I didn't really know how to teach swimming. I swam and knew a little bit about it. And we began to do that. And then I thought, I love this summer job. So that morphed into water safety instructor. That morphed into water safety instructor trainer. Then when I finished my master's degree, I'm jumping forward, I had a 9-month contract at Ohio University, which is the beginning of the women's track and field program and the beginning of the swimming and diving program there. They had just begun to give scholarships. And they were just getting it going, and so it was a 9-month program. So in the summer, they needed an aquatics director back in Lexington, and so I applied for it and got that. So, all these little things are resume builders. Yeah. One thing leads to another. I loved all of that. And so then, backtracking a little bit more, when I was a graduate student at UK working on my master's degree, as a graduate student, you had to teach and coach and work intramurals and do all those fun things. So I got a lot of coaching background there, too. Yeah. And Skeeter Johnson, who was one of my mentors, said, by the way, we need a volleyball coach. Yeah, I've played it. We need a track coach. Yeah, I've done a little of that, too. And it was like, okay, you guys are going to work with a club team. Yeah. Well, jumping forward, when Ohio University was looking to begin their track and field program, I had as much background as a lot of people in those days, and I certainly had the aquatic background. So I became a two-sport coach, which is like, you just don't hear anything like that.
That doesn't happen anymore.
No, it just doesn't happen anymore. But hats off to them because they were jumping in, starting to give their scholarships, et cetera, et cetera. So I went up there, loved it, loved the school, et cetera. And then, this is the chain here. My advisor calls up, says, by the way, the High School Athletic Association has an opening administrative position. I knew about them. I thought that would be an interesting job. I think I could do it. I'm just going to throw my hat in the ring. So guess what? When I interviewed for the position, they were looking for somebody to run the state volleyball tournament, to run the state track meet, and the state swimming and diving championship.
It's like it was written for you.
Bingo. And so I think I just had a diverse background. One thing just led to another. And I think, when I taught a little bit in the kinesiology department, I always told students, if you get an opportunity, no matter what it is, even if it's outside your comfort zone, take it because you just never know where it'll lead.
Yeah, and it seems like all of those opportunities, beginning with all of your opportunities to play different sports early in life, landed you in this career.
Incredible. Yeah. I look back and go, this is pretty amazing. And, if I'd have turned any of it down and said, nah, I just don't feel like doing it, I wouldn't be where I am today, which is retired.
Yeah.
And still playing tennis.
Good. So when you talk a little bit about your current activity and what you enjoy doing now.
Well, right now, I've got some creaky knees, but I swim. I am more active swimming-wise in the summer, so I swim laps out at Spindletop. But I'm involved in the wintertime in seasonal tennis at the tennis club.
Okay.
And then right now I'm involved with outdoor tennis at Spindletop 2 days a week and an occasional lesson on Sunday night.
Great.
So I love tennis. Yeah, I love to swim, so I'm still, pretty active. But you talk about your injuries. Well, they get creaky, you take a leave, and then you go on out and play.
Did you have any injuries when you were playing sports?
I didn't, not too bad. I was playing some softball one time and reached up stupidly without my glove on to grab a ball and broke the ring finger. And I had a fracture in my elbow. I fell doing something. But other than that, no, I didn't have any major, and those were, I had a cast on my finger for a while and just went on.
Okay, so pretty short-term.
I was lucky.
Injuries,
yes, I was lucky.
Yeah, that's very lucky considering how many injuries we see today.
Exactly.
So what are your biggest, if you think about your activity today, what are your biggest challenges to being active and maintaining that lifestyle?
Well, I think you have to get over a little bit of inertia. And I'll have to tell you that my last 8 years at the Kentucky High School Athletic Association was as commissioner. And those types of administrative positions, you're at a desk a lot in a computer. And you kind of get yourself lulled into a little more sedentary lifestyle than you really need to. And so when I retired, I vowed to get back into a little bit more activity, and I did begin to do some yoga last summer, and I really like that. So, I'm on some boards, and like everybody else, you can make an excuse. But I will tell you, once I'm out and about, I'm great.
Yeah. And it sounds like a lot of yours are connected with other people as well. Is that a big part of your activity?
It is, and that's the other thing, too. And I would have to tell you that I still, to this day, will be in a grocery store. In my first job when I was 15 and 16, a kid will come up to me and go, "Weren't you a lifeguard?" So I know as many people in the aquatic world as anything else. And in the Kentucky High School Athletic Association, over 31 years, when you ran all these events and saw people at tournaments, what I get this day and time, and I love it, they go, "You look so familiar." And I hate to ever tell them what I really did, but,
Yeah.
It's fun.
Very good. So when you think about girls and women in sport, what kind of advice do you have for girls and women who are trying to be more active?
I think some women, sad to say, we don't have enough activity in the schools anymore, in the elementary school, et cetera, et cetera. And, to me, my advice is like to mothers and those, that are in positions like that is to encourage your kids to be active. And I think you have to set the standard. But my thing is get into something that you really like to do. I mean, I've got friends, of course, I work with a ballet company. They're into Pilates. They do these things that are unbelievable. And they pay a lot of money. And, there's a lot of things you can do for free, like get out and walk and things like that. Because if you're more active, if you're a busy person, or if you have something on your mind, it becomes, it minimizes it in a heartbeat. And it's such a healthy thing for your body just to keep moving. And I think it's harder and harder this day and time. Opportunities, sometimes they're too costly, or I don't buy that totally as an excuse. But, there's a lot of benefits from engaging in sports. And one is, as you mentioned, close friendships. I've got friendships. I still have coaches from the Southeastern Conference that I know, High School Sports Association. I'm going back to the National Federation of State High School Associations. I was on their board of directors when I was commissioner. They are celebrating their 100th year in high school sports in Indianapolis. It's going to be something, I still have colleagues out there from all over the country. We will go back to the way it was when we were all commissioners and talking about the, issues ahead of us. So it's unbelievable the benefits, and some of them are kind of subtle like that. Obviously you feel better, you look better, you can drop your weight, you're healthier, your blood pressure isn't up there, and so those are some of the benefits. But just the friendships you make and kind of the underscored things, I think, are just as important.
Yeah, I love the idea of, highlighting the fun and finding an activity you think is fun. All of the interviews that I've done so far, the women and men as well have talked about the fun, and they really enjoyed the activities that they're doing, and friendships too. It's a big part of activity for a lot of people.
Exactly. And a lot of it is just, decide what you're going to do and plan some things 2 or 3 days a week. I'm a big list maker. I always have been. I like to jot things down. If I got it on a list, I'm doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is switching gears a little bit, but you had been talking about the transformation. You've been involved in the transformation in girls and women's sports. How do you think, what do you think we can still do to give girls more opportunities? Where are the needs in making sure girls have the opportunity to be active?
Well, I think if I had $1 gazillion at every high school, and I'm going to speak to that, I would implement tons of intramural programs just to let kids, girls, and boys too, experience playing basketball. I mean, there may be one varsity team at a school. I mean, you have 2,000 kids. One varsity, one junior varsity, boy and girl. But wouldn't it be great to learn to play, learn to dribble? The fun of participating and learning a little bit about a sport, learning the rules and regulations of a sport. Very interesting. Even if you love sports and you want to be a spectator, you like basketball, you like football, you like to go to volleyball, learn the rules. And it enhances your appreciation of a sport in the spectator side of things. So I've dug deep into ballet, and I had ballet and tap when I was younger, but that is a very athletic thing. And we have our ballet company also teaches adults. And, we don't care if they're klutzy. The strength that they get from a participation like that, or yoga, or one of those types of programs, if people can just jump in and find something they like to do. I don't buy the fact, I can't do it. Bull. Just get out there.
Yeah. So if you think about your life without physical activity or sport, how would it be different?
I can't even imagine. I like theater. I was in children's theater, also at the urging of my mother, and I love that, which helped me be a better public speaker for sure and have a little confidence. But I love the arts. I might have gone in that particular direction, but I really can't imagine, especially this day and time, just being behind a computer screen all the time and sitting around. I just can't do it. I mean, it's impossible for me.
Yeah. And that's the same answer I've gotten from a lot of folks. Like, I don't even know how to begin to answer that question.
Exactly.
So the final question is just, what other advice do you have for girls and women around sport and physical activity?
Well, I think today's woman and girl, they need that feeling of being successful, that and the interaction that sport certainly brings to the table, like nothing else. It's everybody's right this day and time, and everybody, nobody is ever wrong, et cetera, et cetera. Well, in sports, you learn, you are, and you're out of bounds, and you learn those rules and regulations. And so, to me, the lessons, I would just advise people to engage in something, again, back to the fun thing that you enjoy doing, and get involved in a sport. If there isn't one, form a club. Be independent about that. Well, I grew up in the club sport era, and I had a really good friend in college. She was a lacrosse player. UK had a lacrosse club. They had a field hockey club. And so I didn't know how to play lacrosse. She said, hey, come on out. I'll teach you how to play lacrosse. So the next thing I know, I'm involved in a game, and we're going to a workshop in Michigan. And so I think you don't want to sit on the sidelines. My advice is don't sit on the sidelines. Get out and get involved. And as women grow up and maybe have their own children, they need to get their children involved too. You've got to be a participant in a lot of things, and I think sports, are a great avenue.
That's great. Anything else you'd like to add today?
No, I when I look back, because even at the University of Kentucky, a lot of the women's sports were at club level. At least they were a start, okay? And from that seed grew what you have today and the budgets that you have today for women. Mm-hmm. And I was of the era when we traveled, we drove vans, and the coaches drove vans if you wanted to compete. Mm-hmm. And you also had to request, if you wanted postseason play, the dean of students. Okay, there was no budget, really. There was a small budget for recreational club sports. And one of the most fun things I got to do was work on the very first athletics budget for women at UK. And I think it was $150,000.
Oh, my goodness.
And the interesting part there is you had these talented women out there, basketball players. One of my sports that I was really a faculty sponsor for was women's golf. And one of our players, we had a terrific 4-person team. And there was a golfer named Nancy Lopez who played at Tulsa, who went on to be one of the first LPGA big success stories. We played in a tournament, and we beat her. And our Myra Van Hoos, black welder, was I'm pretty sure about this, the first scholarship recipient at the University of Kentucky. Once that one went into the Department of Athletics.
Okay.
And in the high school ranks, she was a 4-time state champion. Okay. So I got to see that evolution. That was pretty remarkable.
It's an amazing, in a relatively short period of time.
Really. And, you're sitting down and, I think it was Sue Feenstra, who was the director of club sports, that became the first woman administrator on the athletic staff, writing down, okay, Sue, how many shoes do we need for basketball, and what do you think those cost? We'd write all that kind of stuff down. And it's like, okay, we got to put something together to get going. Now, I don't even know what their budget's, probably $12 million or something.
I don't know exactly what it is, but it's more than
$150,000. $150,000. But I wouldn't, when you can start from scratch and build something, transition that back to a woman who has never learned to swim, and see that type of success and confidence that builds. There is nothing like that. And then when you go, like I'm a season ticket holder for women's basketball, and I love to come watch the volleyball team too when I have time. And you watch that level now, and you were there when we were scratching the surface and just getting some folks together that were non-scholarship, most of them, to start playing. That is something to behold.
Yeah, and it's not that long in history and back in time, but we so quickly forget what it was like not that long ago, and I'm speaking as someone who was a female athlete in college, and you forget how different it was not that long ago.
It's true, and I'm hopeful that today's athletes they don't have to sit there and bow down to the people that led the way, but that they do appreciate the efforts that are made, and they make some efforts and give back to their sports too a little bit and contribute to make it good for the next generation, because activities. This day and time with everybody with holding on to their electronics all the time, and I like them too, it's a time of sedentary. It can take control of you before you know it. I'll get on my computer screen and 2 hours later I'm like, God, I've been sitting here for 2 hours. Jeez, I got to get up.
We are all guilty of that for sure. But I think that highlights the importance of sport and physical activity for everyone, not just girls, but especially for girls and women.
It does, and I think too, as you get into the gains that have been made, by Dr. Ireland and others in the sports medicine field, they can get you back out playing pretty quickly. I know I had when I was coaching diving at UK, one of my women, she had a knee injury and had to have orthoscopic, and literally Dr. Ireland got her up and going after about 2 days. Amazing. And that's the key. You get up, you rehab, you get back into what you love to do. Yep. So, it goes hand in hand with the participation levels, et cetera. So.
Great. Well, we really appreciate your time today, and thank you for coming in.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Champions of Active Women podcast. This podcast is brought to you by the Active Women's Health Initiative and was produced by the Faculty Media Depot at the University of Kentucky. If you enjoyed this episode, you can listen and subscribe to all of our episodes wherever you find your podcasts. For up-to-date information about the Active Women's Health Initiative, you can find us on social media at UKAWHI. Thank you for supporting us as we work to promote health and physical activity among girls and women across the lifespan.